Morning. So welcome to UA Professional Development Seminar Series. And today we have another exciting presentation. So today the title is Insights and Findings from the Anchorage Protected Bike-Lane Pilot Study. And we have three presenters today. And they are Brad Coy, Zach Hartman, and Colin Singleton. I would ask them to introduce themselves. So I can produce the introduction stage. With that, welcome again. And who is starting first? Yeah, I'll start first. And this is one of the presentations which I'm interested in listening because since I am very interested in non-motorized users, so this is one of the interesting projects. Here.
My name is Zach Hartman. I work in the Municipality of Anchorage's Traffic Engineering Department. I'm here with the Director of the Traffic Engineering Department and appointed Municipal Traffic Engineer Brad Coy and Colin Singleton from CRW. Colin Singleton led up the consultant team. So we're here today to talk about the two different phases of the Anchorage Protected Bike Lane pilot study. Some of you might be familiar with some of this as road users. But we're going to get into starting with the origin of this project, how did it come about, how to get funded, who was involved, what is a pilot study, what can it do for us, protected bike lanes, and what they do, and then get into some of the details of what Colin will cover, the design, the material choices, all of the public input that went in to make this a successful project, and then Brad will close us out at the end, talking about how do we move forward from this. And how can these sort of efforts be used in different venues to transform Anchorage to be more suitable for all ages and abilities. So starting off to talk about the team, at a high level, this was a partnership between the Municipality of Anchorage and the Department of Transportation. This project was funded through the bipartisan infrastructure package into DOT's RD&T2 program, so research and technology transfer. So at its base, this was a research project. UA gets a lot of these research projects, but this one was a little bit different because it was, out on the road trying something in a temporary context. It wasn't just DOT's research group that we worked closely with. The second phase of this project was actually on a DOT owned and operated roadway. So we were working with the local staff, maintenance and operations, design, their leadership as well. And on the municipal level, across lots of different departments, we had collaboration. So I won't even name them all because it involved almost everyone, parks, people mover, all the maintenance entities were critically involved. But the project team was not just limited to the municipality and DOT. It was a big project team, and this project team was what I think made the project successful. Like I said, Colin Singleton led up the group with CRW Engineering. They were supported by Kittleson Associates, doing a lot of the traffic work and analysis on that end. And then Huddle AK did a great job of leading the public involvement. I think it was Colin at one point that said that this project, in no small part, is almost just a public involvement project. It was such a big part of this project that I didn't necessarily see in the beginning, so the consultant team did a great job there. I'll point out on the top left that Bike Anchorage was a critical part of the project team. A little bit unusual to have what is ultimately an advocacy organization involved in the project so intently, but it was great. They were involved in all of our bi-weekly or weekly at some points coordination meetings. They were contributing to corridor choices and design decisions. And then they did a huge lift, once things were actually implemented, and reaching out to, their network and supporting a lot of the events and things like that. And then as well as the Anchorage Assembly member Daniel Boland was involved in this project when it was just a concept and hopefully successful research application. I think having the support at that level of an elected official helped ease some of the nervousness in the agency groups. It's a brand new way of doing things. So having that support at a high level made kind of getting those signatures on agreements and permits through, I think was a big help, as well as the constituent support that the assembly brought to us. And then, like I mentioned earlier, ultimately this is a big public involvement project, so. Doing this in a vacuum, I think we would have learned a lot, but the engagement we had with the public brought us so many more lessons than we could have got without them. So again, the public involvement effort to meet a lot of the business owners, members of the public, trucking organizations, all these sorts of things was instrumental to the success. And then the massive amount of feedback. I like this photo because, I mean, just from a transportation project perspective, pretty rare to get people like this excited to come out to like ribbon cutting. People love if storm drains get fixed and, pavements looking nice, but this was truly like a celebration, which was neat. And from the research project perspective, this isn't in some, lab or some dark study room. People were engaged in this research project, which was pretty neat. So to kind of back up a little bit to set the framing for the details we're going to be talking about later, just at a high level, what is a protected bike lane? Probably familiar with like painted bike lanes. We see those a lot in Anchorage. What's different about a protected bike lane or a PBL, if we use that acronym, is that it's a bike lane that has additional separation from traffic that is accentuated by some sort of vertical component. Vertical component can be many different things. Protected bike lane is a very broad spectrum. In this case, we use flex posts, but you can use curb and gutter, more protection like jersey or F-shaped concrete barriers at the big spectrum. For the purpose of the pilot, we use these white flex posts and some other devices you'll see later. And then what is a pilot study? So, protected bike lanes haven't been done in Anchorage. So it was kind of like, how is this going to fit in the Anchorage context? Trying it out with a lighter, quicker, cheaper material gave us the opportunity to test it. What worked about it, what didn't, how can we improve in the future? We were learning all these lessons in advance without an expensive capital project where mistakes would be a lot more difficult to fix. And an exciting thing as well that we learned about pilots through this process, we learned they're a great way to test designs. Not just our design for what a protected bike lane might look like, but for a whole different type of facility. We'll talk about two-way bike lanes later. This is an example photo of that. We were trying to partner with some existing DOT projects, and through that, DOT project management did a great job reaching out to Federal Highway Administration and saying, can these pilots be a part of the Federal Highway project development process, the NEPA process? And we found out, yes, they can. Federal Highways is supportive of pilots being used as a way to research and get more analysis on, potential project alternatives. We didn't pursue that option because the timelines didn't work with that project, but it's exciting to know that in Anchorage and, US as a whole, that these sorts of deployments over a couple months or a summer can be used to see, hey, did this alternative, maybe a road guide or something like that, did it break the system? And if we did break the system, it's a really relatively cheap way to learn that and understand what design alternatives might have, what impact they might have on the traveling public. So getting into the two phases, again, this was across 2 summers. We really got going in the summer of September of 2023. We wanted to do something in 2023, but we were limited in the scale of what we could pull off that summer. So what we opted to do was focus on the Pine and McCary corridor over by Russian Jack Park. There's lots of reasons to choose that corridor, but that corridor had an existing buffered bicycle lane. So it had a little bit of horizontal separation in the roadway between cars and the traveling public, a perfect spot to plop down those flex posts. So that was where we started. I'll go forward a page right here. So Pine and McCary Street between DeBar and Mountain View Drive by Russian Jack Park, going across that overpass over the Glen Highway. You can see here both the before conditions and what we implemented. So before there was that buffered bicycle lane, so it was about 1.5 feet away from the drive lanes. The thing I'll point out here is that you'll see the parking on the far left. So the parking was curb tight and the bike lane was kind of floating in between the parking and the car lane. So it doesn't take much to imagine the conflicts that might come about there. The after conditions, we, like I said, dropped those flex posts into that existing buffer where there was one. Kind of the biggest traffic arrangement change we made was flipping that bike lane and that parking. So now any parked cars would kind of act as a protection themselves as well, not just the post and curb. So here is a photo to kind of show that off. At the top, you see the buffer space and the bike lane, but that parking is against the curb there. And then in the bottom photo, you can see where that got flipped. Now the parking is floating, acting as that protection, and the bike lane is against the curb with those additional devices. So that's a quick example of what phase one looked like. And then phase two, we had a little bit more lead time, we could take a bigger bite, and we considered all sorts of different corridors. But ultimately, what we landed on after lots of involvement was this route in downtown Anchorage, the route in green. Two reasons for this route selection. At a high level, there's lots of them. But in downtown right now in code, it's illegal to bike on the sidewalk. You have to bike on the street in this red shaded area. There's lots of streets in downtown Anchorage that aren't very supportive of that. Taking a lane as a cyclist on 6th Ave or A Street is not something I'm comfortable with, and definitely not all ages and abilities. And also this route in green is nice because it connects the coastal trail to Chester Creek, which is, a little bit further down than the image we see here, through downtown, which is great. So you can kind of get from Chester Creek or the coastal trail on all ages and abilities, more comfortable facility into downtown. And there are some photos of that. So the process for that, there wasn't a really easy way. There wasn't an existing bike lane on these facilities. So on both 6th Ave and A Street, of the 3 vehicle lanes that were there, we took the left lane and converted that 12-foot or so, 11-foot or so left lane into a 2-way bike facility. So a lot more complex this time. We had a lot more design time ahead of us and involvement, but that involved, changing signalization because now there's traffic on the asphalt going the opposite way. So we had some new signals up. Lots of signage to warn drivers of road users going a different way than they might be accustomed to over the last 50 years. And then, as you can imagine, the public involvement in the downtown context was definitely scaled up from Pine and Fair Street. So all of this was done, with the municipal efforts. I mentioned the signals, that was done by the signals crew, and it was the municipal paint and sign staff, the folks that are putting up new stop signs that get knocked down, repainting the roads every summer. Those were the folks that were gluing down flex posts and putting out this marking tape here. You can see Colin and I in the middle of this photo. We're the ones in large part marking out where all these flex posts are going to go. As we're all transitioned over to Colin, and he'll be able to get into more details on design, materials, and the details of the process to get this all done.
Do you know when this started? When that painting started? Is it May 1st or?
Yeah, to allow for a first sweep. Yeah.
It was not May 1st, it was May.
May 30th.
Yeah.
Later at 8:30.
So speaking of which, I'll show you here. This kind of portrays the timeline, and really I just want to give an overview of the how quickly we were able to get from June 2023 to a pilot installed 3 months later. That included procuring the materials that hadn't used in Anchorage before, so that was quite a rush. And then in terms of getting the second phase on 6th Avenue and A Street, there was a lot of coordination there. There were, not everyone was ready to suddenly take a lane out of both those important routes. And this shows kind of all those steps of getting to a yes. There's a lot of conversations in the background, a lot of coordinating with different departments, a lot of public outreach ahead of time, portraying what that type of facility could look like. So that's something that the public may not always be aware of happening in the background. Let's talk briefly about the design. When we think about implementing a protected bike lane or swapping the condition, having floating parking, there's a lot of design considerations that go into that. Even thinking about sight distance for floating parking, to set that back enough that you could see, have the sight distance that you normally would. There's some compromises that were worked out. So this actually shows some guidance from some work in Denver that we borrowed and incorporated into our design. Now, how did we, we didn't bid the project, but how did we document that design and communicate that to agencies. Two of the reasons why, or one of the reasons why we were able to construct both phases so quickly using labor from the paint and sign shop was that we had existing projects that we were basically able to overlay design. If we didn't have all that survey record information, it'd be very difficult for us to lay things out in a clear way. And our first attempt was to really try to provide some templates for driveways where these islands where we basically bulb out using curbs and posts. We tried to template that, but in the end, what we had to come down to was physically going and marking each of these locations on the ground. So Zach and I, like you mentioned, use these plans to go and physically lay out every single building. Let's talk briefly about materials, like Zach mentioned. There was an interest from the public in having something very robust to separate them from moving vehicles, and an interest in using materials like this, these 40-foot steel barriers and F-shaped barriers. We had some available that were there during the winter, but then there's a lot of issues in terms of pinning these materials down on the road when they're struck. They were ultimately not able to be incorporated into the design. And so we moved forward with some of these other materials. Here on the middle right, you see the flex post that Zach mentioned. So these are, they rebound. They were able to withstand multiple rebounds. But there are some, challenges with these materials. Different points of failure on them that we, learned about. There's also a big question about how these get attached to the pavement. You can see on the left middle image, places where those could be screwed into the road. And the idea of having pavement penetrations at each one of those was not, no one was open to that. So we actually moved forward with what was an 8-inch by 8-inch butyl pad that went under each of them. It seemed a little bit silly to use an adhesive to hold down these objects that were going to be hit by vehicles. But we found that it actually stuck. It's not stick. It stuck well, and we learned a lot about the condition of the road underneath having the most effect in terms of whether that would withstand. We had these rubber curbs in the bottom left, and used a butyl tape that went along those, and used that to provide even more of a barrier, not just having the flex post. I think that gave a sense of security between the parked cars and the bike lane. You'll see in the upper right what's actually a strip of tar paper. And one of the big challenges, we thought Pine and Carry would be just a slam dunk. We have existing road space, buffer bike lane, we're just gonna flip flop these. And we understood as we got further into the design that taking those 4 existing stripes and making that a place where drivers felt comfortable parking was really difficult. We didn't want to condition drivers to park over bike lane markings, so we needed some way to mask over those. Couldn't use black spray paint, couldn't use anything that was going to leave any type of residue over those. And we couldn't physically go and grind those markings out and replace them. We didn't have the construction money to do that. So we started thinking about lots of different ways to accomplish that. Coming up against the lack of time, we ended up using roofing tar paper and using the same butyl adhesives. Those stuck down for much of the time, but some of the temporary striping that we had intended to physically mark in the protected bike lane, we were not able to. So a lot of lessons learned just in terms of how long it took to procure those materials. And some field observations that we got from that first phase. We saw delineators get knocked over in high use areas, where the road was dirty and was not, clean or in a rough condition, so that butyl couldn't stick. Places where maybe we had marked it with too much spray paint, or it was wet, we had poor adhesion there. We had some cyclists being confused about where they were supposed to position themselves. You can see in the lower left, the cyclist riding in the old buffered bike lane. You can see that tar paper over it. We had some people parking, refusing to not park where they should. We had people putting trash cans in the middle. We saw some damage to different parts of the flex posts. But we also saw some really positive things. Even when posts were hit, they were still able to create basically a uniform barrier there between them. We saw a lot of people parking in the right spot. We saw cyclists getting out and using it, maybe not in huge numbers in the rainy September, but definitely use. This photo in the middle right showed that even folks in a recumbent bicycle could fit in the facility, and they were using it even as we were installing it. We saw that tar paper lasted, and the signage delineating helped people figure things out. We also found that we could reuse a lot of those materials, so that wasn't all wasted. And that went into informing how we did the next piece of the design. Another important part of the project was, like Zach mentioned, public involvement. So we had these celebrations. The top two photos are from the phase one. And we had a ribbon cutting and had a lot of people come out. We also had public involvement, pre and post installation surveys to gauge people's sentiments and thoughts about the protected bike lane. We had a fairly pared back effort, the first phase, and realized how significant that was, and increased that quite a bit in the second phase. So moving from that, we came away in the late fall of 2023, and started thinking about how are we going to do this second phase in 2024. One of the key feedbacks we'd heard, piece of feedback that we heard was that people were interested in a two-way protected bike lane, and they didn't feel, great about the plastic posts. They thought the material that we used didn't look as nice. We got lots of different feedback like that, and that helped us as we moved on to the second phase. Open doors for us, because now we weren't just looking at one-way facilities on each side of the road. We could look at maybe taking a lane of travel. And so this shows a little more in detail both what we did for the second phase and all the different pieces that went into it, and also shows the physical construction. You'll note in this video some different types of delineators that incorporated occurred. You'll see some signalization. So I'll give that a play.
Having the bike lane come to fruition feels surreal. Biking it today it was not something, it was more than I anticipated it would be. It's been a long time coming as we've been all doing all the prep work for it, and you can see it on the design, but actually seeing it in person and biking it and experiencing it was at a different level. Thank you so much to all the staff at the paint and sign shop, the signal maintenance shop, M&O street maintenance, all of those on the signals and traffic engineering department and other parts of the city that have made this happen.
Something like this is usually falls in the hands of a private contractor where we pay a consultant to design this big project and it goes out to bid, and so to be able to do it with amazing supportive staff and pulling all this off. The paint and sign shop has been fantastic for months and months and months, over a year now, on getting organized and having everything prepped and ready to go to be able to take action this week and pull it all off. The signal shop has been on the spot and their work has been incredible, and they do it so quickly, and to have these bike signals installed is amazing. Street maintenance has been doing the sweeping, and we have ongoing coordination with them to make sure this all stays clean and looking good. Just the fact that we're able to do this with the public agency staff has been fantastic, and I can't give them enough credit for all this because they did it all.
That's just a little bit of what we physically installed, and shows that shows a little bit of kind of the process of physically installing it, some of that public involvement, and two other pieces of really important coordination helped get us to that point where we could physically install. One was looking at the traffic and safety of what we were proposing. On C Street, for example, there was a pattern at C Street and 6th of red light running. There were 29 red light running collisions since September 2020 that occurred. And we had a member of the public who was telling us, this is really safe. This is a huge safety concern. You're proposing to put this protected bike lane right across C Street, and someone is going to get hurt. And so we did a deep dive. We looked at all sorts of different things we could do, and we actually landed on closing the left turn lane southbound of C Street between 4th and 6th as a way of getting people's attention. And that was a huge piece to getting this project moved forward. The other was some coordination with the trucking industry. We met early on with them and proposed a concept. And as we got further along and really they could visualize what we were talking about, they had some concerns about how close we were putting these flex posts up against the middle lane of travel. And we had a meeting with them where we really understood their safety concerns that they experienced as an industry. And one of the things we agreed on was before the ribbon cutting, the day that we installed these posts, we went out there with their driver and had them run through this turning movement. And they even put a student in the driver's seat to make sure that people of all different experience levels could operate that. And so that's one of the things we talked about. This is at 6th and A. We're taking a lane out. Trucking industry, but really I think it could set the stage for improved coordination going forward, and something I'm really excited about. This project over and over again highlighted the importance of sitting down and listening to people and working together towards making that project. So then the kind of final piece of the process was removing these, everything that we put down, had to be removed and return the road back to its previous condition. And honestly, this is something that kept me up at night, trying to find a type of striping that would go down and it would stick perfectly, but then could be easily removed at the drop of a coin. So what we found is yeah, there are some materials that didn't stick as well, but everything came up. And this is how things look now. They've been returned to the roads they previously were. So that's kind of the overview of the process. I'm going to shift now into kind of the takeaways, the evaluation. You know, this is a research project and we can't just do something neat. We have to learn from it. So how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of different types of data that we were collecting. One was getting speed counts and providing speed feedback on A Street. And so we were able to see, you know, how did speeds change as we eliminated this left lane here, as you can see on A Street. Even how did that interact with bikes crossing at 10th Avenue? Or how did that work with school taking place? There's a school up here just south of 9th Avenue on the east side of A. So those are things that we learned a lot from. Using pneumatic tubes to do speed and vehicle classification studies. This shows, the graph at the bottom shows daily vehicle volumes by speed. So those are speed categories, 0 to 11 miles an hour, 11 to 15, or 11 to 16 and so forth. The blue shows the pre-installation speeds, and the orange shows during that phase 2 pilot. And we see a slight change basically from that 21 to 26 category into the 16 to 20. These speeds were at on 6th Avenue between E and F. And what we found was on average, the speeds decreased only about 2 miles an hour. So there's a, you know, that relative to what we were hearing from the public, there's total gridlock, but then looking and saying, okay, really we're seeing during the weekdays down from 23 to 21, and during the weekends from 21 to 19. So not a huge change. We also looked more globally at doing travel time studies. So this is showing A from 9th to 6th. The time on the vertical axis is in seconds. And then we have 6th from K to A, again with the time in seconds, and then for different times of the day. So you can see at both of these, the peak PM hour, there is a slight delay from the blue, from the orange to the blue. So this is when it says post, that means we did the study following the installation. And, you know, we see about a 50-second delay on A Street, or sorry, on 6th Avenue. And it's similar, a little less on A Street. So that's not a huge change, 50 seconds. I will acknowledge that at 6th and I, people were seeing a little more congestion. So that would, you know, maybe contribute even a little more. But the takeaway for us is we didn't break the system. We did have an effect on people's driving. And I think there's a larger conversation about, you know, is 6th Avenue designed the way it should be? Should it be a highway going through town?
So what do you mean by Bluetooth? How do you connect? Is it like in the vehicle, inside the vehicle or outside the vehicle?
So it's capturing the Bluetooth signals that go by
Okay, 2 points.
2 points.
Okay.
And then using that to get an outage. Another thing, you know, we're trying to look at how it affects all users. And one of the kind of hypotheses was, would this project affect noise levels and potentially, you know, have an impact for pedestrians who are walking along. Would this make it a more desirable place? And we did see some slight reductions there, and just another thing that we're considering. Really though, what we found is that for a lot of the public, the important thing was this question of how many people are using the facility, and does that show that it was worthwhile or necessary? It's difficult because, I'm not sure that there was a magic threshold or number where we would suddenly make the public say, oh, that's enough. Early on, we used this counter post that was installed there for the duration of the project. And we learned a lot about it, honestly. It bounces a signal off a fixed object, and we oriented it so that it could bounce off this mailbox. What we found though was that that signal was actually capturing hits from behind that mailbox, and we were getting numbers that weren't as accurate. So we learned a lot about that technology and maybe better places where we could position something like that for a permanent counter post. In addition to that, we had another tool that helped us refine that understanding of daily bicycle usage. And that was the installation of a radar detector at 6th and C. Wavetronics were able to use that and the video from the pan tilt zoom cameras on traffic signals to be able to compare the two, to look at video and to look at when we were receiving hits, when we were receiving calls at that signal. And we were able to use that to confirm that radar is a suitable type of detection that we can use. It functioned with the two-way traffic. And that actually confirmed for us about 85 to 155 daily cyclists a day were using the corridor. To put that in comparison, I highlighted this chart of the bike to work day counts that we've done. So in green, you can see that band of 150 to 85 cyclists, and how that compares with other on-street bicycle facilities at a annual, single event per year where we're getting a lot of users. So kind of a neat comparison. So the other thing that was really important was also thinking about crashes and how do we understand, are we making strides towards safety? That concern about at C Street, that concern about the very premise of protected bike lanes as a type of facility that could help attract different types of users. One of the challenges was the duration of our project and comparing that with all this other traffic data that we have. So when we looked at, this is from the phase 1 time to carry, we had data from pre-install data from January 2021 through August 2023 and compared that to the month-long pilot period. So, a difference in period length, very important to state. There were only 2 cyclist involved crashes on the corridor during that pre-install period, and there were none during our install. So that's not conclusive. It doesn't say that we saw 100% reduction in crashes. That's not how we'd interpret that. But it's a reminder that we need to look at crash data over a longer period, and we need to look at it more holistically.
So does this crash bicycles with car, with vehicle?
Yes. So this whole chart shows total crashes, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to cyclist. Those are those 3 categories that we see, and then breaking it pine to bar, so that was saying specifically at the intersection of Pine to Bar, which we didn't have any impact to with our project, versus along the corridor. So. But now looking at the phase two, you know, we're in the process of still crunching the numbers on some of the safety data that we've got as part of our final reporting, but there were no cyclist injuries along this part of the corridor. There were no red light running collisions at 6th and C southbound. There was one along 6th Avenue that was a motorcyclist that traveling at high speed. But we felt really good about that. Does that confirm that protected bike lanes are a panacea that will solve all safety problems? No, but just the fact that we went from having 29 red light running collisions over a period of 4 years or 3.5 years to having none along C Street during the duration of our project, that seems promising to me, at least. And you know, another form of the data that we're collecting, right, is this is not in a lab like Zach mentioned. This is affecting people's everyday. It's about people, and we wanted to get the input from people, subjective though it may be. So one of the things that we did was we did that pre-install, post-install survey comparing how people responded. So this is from the phase one survey, and you can see responses to before the install and during the pilot. We were trying to understand the types of cyclists that were using the facility and then compare that with national trends. We found that the nomenclature used nationally is maybe not always understood, that some people would say they're enthused and confident, but they only feel comfortable riding on pathways. Something that really would be more of an interested but concerned kind of descriptor. So there's some differences there. We learned that maybe we have more of a skewing of people who are confident, who are responding to our surveys, and we took that into consideration. But stepping back during phase one, we saw that there was an interest in more protected bike lanes people saying that would help them feel more comfortable riding. And we took that for what it's worth. Kind of digging in, I found the most value in reading written comments where people talked about the nuance. Some people said, I don't like these flex posts. Other people said, you know, these do a pretty good job just at keeping vehicles away. A lot of people caught on to what we saw in the data, which was a huge speed decrease on Pine Street and McCary Street over the course of the project, and people linking that with safety. And also we had conversations with people in the field. One gentleman mentioned a resident on Pine McCary said, you know, he's seen people go 60 miles an hour. He's seen people be hit at the Pine 6th intersection. And people saying, you know, I feel a lot safer. I feel a lot safer walking on the sidewalk. Those are the types of things we're trying to distill into our final reporting. In terms of the second phase, we're still digging into some of those numbers. But one of the important things to just point out is the enormous response we got as part of our public outreach. We got 81 pre-installation survey responses, 714 post-installation survey responses. Of those, you can see more than 70% were drivers affected by the project or interested in the project. We also got 500, I think the number is actually 598 written comments. Many of those positive, many negative. And so, like I said, this project is not a permanent project, it's a temporary project. And it is taking place in that context of the larger discussion about what should a downtown road like 6th look like? Should it be a highway that helps people get to work as fast as possible? Or as a 50-second delay worthwhile. So now, I'm gonna turn it over to Brad, who's gonna talk us through some of the next steps and how we think about applying these.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Let's see, so. Do you want to talk about the final reporting, or I can jump into that? I guess, so next steps. Is that we are going to be moving to close out the project. The final reporting is getting done now. So some of these numbers are the first that I've seen them. Or looking at the data, and there's going to be additional data to explain. The public and the media have been asking for when this report's going to be ready, and I'm sure we'll be doing some different TV spots to be able to explain and talk about some of this. So this is a good drive-in for us, so to speak, with the friendly crowd to be able to explain some of the things that we're seeing. But we will publish the final draft by the end of the month, have some presentations to the AMAS, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization here, to their technical committee and their policy committee, and then publishing the final report and closing out by the end of the year. So that's the timeline here. Some of the things beyond the project, one of the biggest things that has been an outcome of this is the great coordination and collaboration between DOT and the municipality. Holly Spot-Torres, who works for Huddle, annually tells me every time I see her on any project that, wow, the collaboration that was on the Federal bike lane was transformational and amazing, and if we had that on all of our projects, it would be incredible. And so it's true. It actually, one of the outcomes that people don't necessarily realize from the Protected Bike Lane is that when the assembly asked for a report on the pedestrian crashes we've been having and what we can do about it, the Vision Zero task force that got implemented at the end of September, and that we are still meeting weekly on with DOT and the municipality to try to address those needs. The success of that, in my mind, is heavily influenced by the fact that we're doing this project and developed a lot of those relationships and worked through a lot of the coordination that we needed to. So being able to have strong MOA and DOT relationships are critical and very much affected by the success of the Protected Bike Lane. With regards to the Protected Bike Lane, there are no immediate plans to construct the PBL on 6th and 8th. That wasn't what our focus was in this case, to see is this the right location, but to be able to have the opportunity to explore the PBL in general, see about implementation. But what I can say is there's appetite for more pilot projects, which came through loud and clear as we've been talking with DOT and trying to think, what do we do next year? So next year, we're hoping that there can be some pilot projects. The likelihood of them being bike lane is low. The likelihood of them being lane reduction is high. And the question being, there might be other ways that we want to use those lanes. It's probably not about bikes. In this case, it's about just our infrastructure in general. And those are very critical, important points we are talking about. We do need and want to be looking at additional protected bike lanes. And so likelihood, what we would do on protected bike lanes is explore doing another research project that can look at a winter option, potentially 2026 in the summer, moving into the winter. So you might see another pilot somewhere else, probably not the same location, and very heavily influenced by communication with our maintenance staff and figuring out if we did a bike lane through the winter, what materials we need differently, what equipment is needed. And so there's a lot longer lead time for all of those pieces. But those are going to be some of the discussions that once we have this report and the public is asking, we looked at it, we'll probably lead into next March doing a research request to be able to do that. If everything continues to go as I'm seeing it go, where there's openness to exploring as an option. One of the other thing that is a big win from the Trigger Bike Lane pilot project is that, kind of like you heard, a lot of people were suggesting on Pioneer Carry, hey, instead of having flexibles on both sides of the road, let's put it all on the same side and have two-way. And that was coming from people that did not like Pioneer Carry and the people that did like it. And so that's one of the reasons that we're like, hey, if we have both sides of this suggesting it, maybe there's something to that. And so the second phase in downtown took advantage of that feedback and implemented it. Now, what was some of the feedback that was consistent among both people that didn't like and that did like the downtown project? One of those was, let's do more of this on low volume streets, or why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you focusing on low volume streets? Like, why are you taking the place where cars want to be? Let's think about doing something on low volume streets. So what are we gonna do? That's what we're gonna do. I mean, both people who don't like it and people who did like it have been asking about lower volume streets. So we're gonna be doing a neighborhood greenways initiative. If anybody's biked around Portland, you might have a little bit of exposure to this, but it's basically saying some of our neighborhood streets, let's do shadows on the road, some signage, dropping the speed limits, making it clear, having wayfinding, and especially on the roads that are connecting to our trail system. So we're working on this right now. There's a video that I can show later on, but you can see kind of this image here on the bottom. We're going to be having the greenways around Anchorage as a way to say, this street prioritizes pedestrian and bikes. Come and bike along it. This is a great way to get around town. I bike everywhere. And so in my neighborhood, and I see that I bike, I've kind of over time figured out what the good routes are. Hopefully this is a way to compile all of that and be able to say, hey, you want to get around town? These are some of the best routes in other neighborhoods you might not be familiar with, or you should consider using as your route around town. So hopefully it will encourage additional usage and also improve safety, and be a great way to have this conversation and be responsive. And then once we've done this, and as we're thinking about this, it'll become more clear where there's not good neighborhood connections, and we really do need to do more on arterial. And then I'll be able to have a conversation with someone when they say, why aren't you doing it on lower volume streets? I can say, we are, and we have, there's not options in this part of town. So that's why we're going to do a little bit more invasive, so to speak, projects. So that's kind of how I see the vision of this. And this really is a lower cost way to make a big difference. And hopefully people will see it in their neighborhood, be appreciative, build up community support for bike infrastructure, because it'll benefit not just the cyclists, but everybody along and in those neighborhoods, because we get tons of requests for traffic calming. I hope this is a very successful way to do traffic calming in a way that benefits not just people that live on that street, but everyone. So let's see that goes through. What? We don't have video. Do we have anything else on here? That's
Just moving the question.
okay. So that gets through our presentation, and we have about 10 minutes, looks like, for any questions that you might have, and it can either be me or I can have Colin and Zach ask. Go ahead.
Is there anything done next summer, or is there no research from the money to do with it?
So next summer, the plan, the neighborhood greenways are going to get implemented next summer. So those are going to start showing up.
Has already been identified,
We
the neighborhoods?
We have already done some preliminary concepts of where we're seeing that we would want to do them. So we have about a dozen locations that are preliminary identified. We are okay, perfect. We right now with the Vision Zero work that Anna and I have down the room with DOT, and Zach's involved as well. With the Vision Zero, we're going to community councils talking about reduced speed limits and all the different things that we're doing with regards to improving the community with regards to speeds. And we are talking at that as well about neighborhood greenways and getting feedback. So we have a preliminary list. We're working on getting the website set up, and we're going to have the opportunity for people to say, to recommend streets. But we do have some that we're thinking and getting ready to do.
So Anchorage PBL isn't like the gateway for everything, you're gonna trade probably something different for the
Yeah.
other stuff. One quick comment on that, so if you guys do come up with a map or something like that, a cool way you guys could get the data out to people is like a KMZ file, Google Earth. If you have a line, like people can dump that, get the file and dump it on their Google Earth, and they go, oh, here's where I need to go, and they could easily, that's like super cheap and easy to get people stuff, versus like a hard map or a PDF map.
That's a good point. They can pull it into their phone and be able to have it help navigate.
On a laptop, their phone, and then they go, yep, here's the KMZ file, this is where the map is.
You can even send it out to Google Maps too.
Yeah,
and
or
then
how do you do that too?
Yeah, those are good points. So as we get those, because the neighborhood greenways, it isn't viewed as a permanent. We are gonna be installing, those are not going away.
These are permanent.
The neighborhood greenway ones
Yeah.
will be permanent,
Do they already have funding?
yes.
Okay.
So, to clarify, we have the ability to do it at the end of the summer with the funding we have in place. And the mayor in her budget proposed giving my department additional funding we need to start at the beginning of the summer. And as long as the assembly approves that, which I'm hopeful and optimistic that they will, then it will be earlier in the summer.
Versus after July 1.
Versus after kind of into August.
Yeah.
Because part of it is, it's using the same staff that do some other work. And so, anyway, there's a few other details there, but it is looking like we're getting the additional funding to be able to do it. And we do have some permanent projects that we're looking at incorporating it in so that it actually gets done as part of some projects, so there will be some rebuilds. And, so anyway, things are moving on it. And that one will be happening, I'm excited. The other one that is looking for next year, this one is more of a DOT and it is dependent on staffing and some, primarily on the staffing question, but doing some lane reductions on I Street, L Street, Northern Lights, West Diamond, and potentially Old Seward. So DOT has some pavement preservation projects that they're considering and interested in doing lane reduction pilots, not a protected bike lane, but just taking off lanes of travel and then having it be similar how the pilot was. Tell us what you think we could do with this if we don't have the travel lanes for cars. Should this be snow storage? Should this provide a buffer from the non-motorized? Should this, can this function with the fewer lanes? We, from the traffic side, feel like it should. But we'll be able to see that, confirm it, and then have the public also understand it. And it will be in a way that they're not able to point and say, there's no bikes here, we shouldn't do this, but instead, let's talk about what this could be used for. Because as a winter cyclist, I recognize that the biggest thing we can do for winter cycling is not store snow on pathways and sidewalks. So that's a big kind of question in my mind. How do we get there? So I'm really excited about these lane drop pilots that hopefully will happen next summer. And if it happens in all of those places, I mean, that would be pretty serious and major. And would be a big transformation. There's also an online question. Were travel time for bicycles and pedestrians pre versus during the study evaluated? If we had any pedestrian and bicycle travel time?
Not specifically, but like on Sixth and A, it was very affected by just the existing signal timing that was not changed.
And maybe a question would be, those are Bluetooth devices that were doing the travel times. Was any of it maybe like this during the journey?
It's possible, it's probably not superly, very high represent.
Okay, especially because if it ended after the, I guess it depends where the anyway, so that was something
But anecdotally, when you were moving with traffic on Sixth and A, then you were able to stay more or less with the signal progression and make it all the way from I Street to C Street without missing a signal. But a lot faster than you're on.
yeah, so we don't necessarily have bicycle or pedestrian travel times. I do know as a cyclist who bikes most everywhere, I biked on C a few times before the pilot went in just to get a feel for it. And it's not a preferred way that I would ever really want to spend time on. But as during the protected bike lane, it was like night and day difference, comfortable, pleasant. I was always inspired.
So you said before the pilot, you wouldn't normally use that route as a good route. You didn't see it as a good route for pilot.
Yeah.
Obviously, you saw also different types of users. So people, I brought my daughter, who 6 years old at the time. She was able to bike next to me, in there. We saw people who had maybe trikes, other different types of mobility devices, even motorized wheelchairs. On the Pine Ferry, I saw kids using the bike lane with their skateboards and their pets. So you just saw different user mix, maybe not more numbers.
The other thing I'll add is that a key message that people told me as they saw what we were doing with this was that they felt hope. That they felt like finally there's consideration and thoughtfulness that something will be improved for a non-motorized system. Because if you look at Anchorage, it's really hard to get around without a car. Our system's not really well designed for other modes of travel. And it does have an impact. We have, how much of that is affecting the homelessness situation? Because of how much money you have to put into a car. If you don't have a car, can you get to work? If you don't have work, can you hold a job and have the income? And it perpetuates it. It's an issue. There's parts of town that they don't have car ownership and they are increased, a disproportionate amount of our fatalities and injuries are lower income. And it's because they're the ones out walking and biking. And so if we can accommodate all of that, how much does that benefit our city? So not just me who chooses to, well, I choose to bike because it saves me an additional car cost. So you and I, who are not on the lower end of the income, my family benefits from owning one less car. Not to mention my health benefits and emotional benefits and all those things that I find personally that I benefit from biking have significant benefits for our community, including that kind of hopefulness that we are improving and becoming a more livable community.
One quick question before you close, I guess, the bike parking, do you guys consider like how to deal with that? 'Cause if there's a lot of people using the bikes, and they all go, hey, let's all go to the whatever, Fifth Avenue, Sixth Avenue, at these like humpies or whatever, the increased need for now parking of bikes effectively.
Bike Anchorage did an outreach to businesses and others to try to get a group purchase of different bike storage options. And we did have a map that we offered for businesses to put down, identify where they had bike parking. Beyond that, we didn't do as much on that level. When it becomes when things become permanent, it's easier to have the bike parking and its permanent nature. But that is something that, bikes are something that you have to be careful that you don't have either your bike stolen or something stolen off your bike. And so, yeah, that is something that to be thought of. And we're all open to ideas. So looks like we're wrapping up. Yes, thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and so thank you for participating. So the password for the certificate for today is perfected everything in small letters, right?
That's right.
Perfected. Thank you. I'll see you all next time.
All right, thank you.
How many do you have online?
Let me check.